All right, so you're going to open to the next page of your notes, and you're going to write the number 9 in the corner, because this is Unit 9. And we will write our SOL number, which is 6.9, and our topic on the top line here. So this is congruence and symmetry. So there is a lot of vocabulary to keep up with in this unit. I'm going to try and start with the most basic. First word is polygon. A polygon is just a closed figure or shape. So examples would be like triangle, square, hexagon, just a few examples. Okay, so next we're going to do congruent. And this is a word that we hear a lot throughout this unit. So congruent basically just means the same or equal. The symbol for two things being congruent, or the symbol for congruency, is simply an equal sign with a little squiggle above it. Now there's different things in this unit that we'll talk about being congruent. Line segments, or the way we will see line segments in this unit, really is as the sides of our polygons. Angles, and of course polygons that we just defined above, may be congruent. So I'm going to draw a picture of two different polygons, and we'll talk about what is congruent between the two of them. So do the best that you can to follow along with the shape that I'm drawing. I'm going to draw two trapezoids. These trapezoids are going to be slanted on one side and have a right angle on the other side. I'm doing my best to make them look the same. I think one might be slightly slanted compared to the other, but these are supposed to look the same. This is going to be trapezoid A, B, C, D, and this is going to be trapezoid W, X, Y, Z. All right, so we're going to talk about the parts of these trapezoids that are the same. Trying to make these lines look a little bit more similar. Talk about the parts that are the same and how we would write it. So if I draw a curve in angle A, and I have the same curve, single curve in angle W, I could say that angle A is congruent to angle W, meaning that they have the same measure. I know that they have the same measure because they have the same number of curves. I could draw two curves in angle D and two curves in angle Z. And then I could say that angle D is congruent to angle Z. I could have also given you the angle measure in degrees, but I just did the curves so that you can recognize again what those curves mean. The same number of curves in the angles means that they are the same measure. All right, there is going to be a right angle in angle C as well as angle Y. So I would say that angle C is congruent to angle Y because they are both 90 degrees. And actually there is another 90-degree angle. I have angle B and angle X that are also both 90 degrees. So they are also both congruent. All right, now I'm going to look at these sides. I'm going to draw one little hash mark on this side right here between the A and the D. I would call that side AD. I would write the two letters next to each other that are on either end of that side, that line segment, and draw a line over it. I'm also going to draw one line on the side between W and Z. So I would say that side AD is congruent to side WZ because they both have one little hash mark on them. I'm going to go up top here. I'm going to draw two little marks on that side, and I would call that side AB. I'm also going to draw two hash marks on side WX of my other trapezoid. So I would say that side AB is congruent to side WX. As I go around my shape here, I'm going to draw three lines on side BC of the first trapezoid. So I would say BC, and I'm going to also draw three lines on the right side between X and Y on my right trapezoid. I'm going to say BC is congruent to side XY, because again, they have the same number of markings. They both have 3. And finally, I'm going to look at my bottom edges here. I'm going to draw 4 lines on the bottom here with DC. And if I also have 4 lines drawn on the bottom of my other trapezoid, I would say that DC is congruent to side ZY. All right, and now that I have looked at my angles and my sides, I've determined that for every angle in this first trapezoid, there is an angle at on the other trapezoid that is congruent to it. And for every side on this first trapezoid, there's also a side that is congruent to that as well. So because all of my sides and all of my angles are congruent between the two shapes, I could say that trapezoid A, B, C, D is congruent to trapezoid W, X, Y, Z. Alright, there is also something to pay attention to with the order of the letters in the title of my shapes. And this is important because the order of the letters in the title of the shape also tell you which angles and which sides match up to one another between the two shapes. If I know that these two trapezoids are congruent, if I'm given this statement, then my first letter of the first shape is going to match up, be congruent to the same letter, the first letter of the other shape. So A is going to match up to W, and the angle measures did. B is going to match up with X. C will match up with Y, and D will match up with Z. So there's a couple things we're going to write down now, some vocab words based off of what we just learned. One of the words or phrases that we're going to add is congruent figures. So congruent figures is when you have two shapes that are congruent, or polygons that are congruent. And the way that you can determine if two shapes or two polygons, two figures are congruent is based off of the angles and the sides. So in order for this to be true, the shapes, the polygons, the figures, whichever terminology you want to use, the figures would have to be the same shape and the same size. So basically what this means is if they're the same shape, then they're going to have the same angle measure, because the angles essentially define the shape. If they're the same size, it means they're going to have the same side length. So I'll write same sides. So size and sides sound very similar. They go together, and same shape is defined by having the same angles. All right, so we're getting to actually a point now where some of these vocab words are kind of starting to overlap on one another. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the next one, which is corresponding, because I've already kind of used its definition in here, but I haven't used that word. So corresponding if angles or sides are corresponding, then that's the angles or sides that I said match up to one another. Between congruent or similar figures. Now we haven't talked about similar figures yet, so we're going to do that in a second. So corresponding, that would mean the angles or the sides. You could have corresponding angles or corresponding sides that match up between the congruent or similar figures. So what that means is when I drew these arrows from the A to the W, the B to the X, the C to the Y, and the D to the Z, that means A corresponds to W, or A is corresponding to W. B corresponds with X, C corresponds with Y, and D corresponds with Z. Those are the angles that match up to one another. So they are corresponding.